Welcome everyone to Keep It Classy Tech. This is the second time I'm doing this video. The first upload didn't go through for some reason, so I decided to spend a little more time and add a little more information to this. So the first 5 minutes is the unboxing and setup, and then after that is where I get into some of the more important information. So here we go. Alright, it's here. It's new for 2021, LG's QNED. It's a mini LED backlit quantum dot LCD. It is an IPS panel, but we will see if the mini LED is able to help the black levels that IPS usually struggles with. So let me start getting into the box and let's get going. Alright, so at the top of the box you have your two legs, remote, and paperwork. Power cable is attached to the TV, not removable. They give you quite a few different things here for cable management. You get your 4 screws, 2 for each leg, and the legs are metal and pretty good quality feeling. And it says the color is dark steel silver. So, pretty easy unboxing. Just lay it down. There's a big chunk of foam underneath it already. I added that just to lift it up a little bit more. And then the legs just slot in like that very easily. And then run your 2 screws in to each of the legs. And then I just stood it right up and then realized that the added foam that I added really didn't even need to be there because the foam that's already there is thick enough to not get in the way of the feet sticking downwards. So overall the TV feels about normal weight for TVs these days, at least 65 inches. So you have 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, ports 3 and 4, and then ports 1 and 2 are just the HDMI 2.0B, and the HDMI 3 2.1 port is also the eARC port. So the TV comes with these 4 padding strips on the sides, top and bottom, so that you don't have to press onto the screen when moving it. And then there's also a couple stickers to pull off, and there's a clear plastic peel around the border of the TV, but nothing on the screen itself. So you can currently see a little bit of reflection handling as it is right now, but I'm also going to adjust the camera in a minute to show it next to the G1 OLED and how they handle reflections differently. You can see at the bottom it says QNED Mini LED, and it actually looks pretty nice, pretty high quality look and build. It's a little thicker than I would have expected, but it does look nice. Alright, so here it is next to the G1 OLED. And you can see that the QNED has more what looks like diffusing to the reflection, but it doesn't cut out as much of the light as the OLED does. Alright, so to keep this video kind of short, I cut out the initial setup process, and then here is the home screen with all your apps and your input selection. So on the Xbox Series X, it detects 4K 120 Hz. However, this TV does not currently, with this firmware, do Dolby Vision 120 Hz. So I'm about to show that I did update the TV to the one that is currently available, and it did add the game optimizer menu, and it does do Dolby Vision gaming at 60 Hz, but it does not do 120. When you switch the TV to 120 Hz and it was in Dolby Vision, then if you go back into the game, it will still be at 60, and then if you quit out of the game and relaunch it, then it will switch over to 120 Hz and put you into HDR mode or HDR10. Also, the optimizer menu here with FreeSync has wide and high settings, but there is no G-Sync, so keep that in mind if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, and there's also no boost mode like there is on the OLEDs. Here I'm messing around with the local dimming setting, and I have later come to find that high is the safest bet. For a lot of content, low looks like it's not even on, and it gives you very grayish blacks. Medium has more blooming than high, so high, generally speaking, is the safest setting for it. It comes pretty cool in game mode, so I set it to warm 50 for now, although it does look too warm. I will have to measure that later and see. The next thing for gaming is HGIG. I don't know if it's an LG thing or an HGIG thing or an Xbox thing or what, but when you're doing the Xbox HDR calibration setup and you have HGIG enabled, it's clipping at 800 nits when the TV goes to 1000, so it should not be doing that. If you are in a game like Sea of Thieves where you have a slider, that doesn't clip until 1000 like it should. Even in Dolby Vision, it clips at 1000 or 1050, thereabouts, close enough. But for whatever reason, this screen here is clipping at 800. So knowing that the TV actually clips at 1000, I would set it to 1000 and just ignore what it says. And then in your games, if they give you a nit value, set those to 1000 as well. So that segues into the brightness of the TV. It's 1000 nits at a 25% window and just under 1000 at 10, and then continues to go down from there, down to 585 at a 1% window and 350 at a 0.25% window, and can't measure any smaller than that. And so if you're currently thinking that sounds disappointing, well, you're right. That is pretty disappointing because we did expect this to get quite a bit brighter. I mean, I was trying to keep expectations more like, 1400 nits, maybe 13 on the low end. But you know what? There's something else that this TV has that, let's say like Samsung, for example, just isn't giving, and that's detail. So the shadow detail with this TV is excellent, as is the HDR highlight detail. So when I look up at the sky, all the stars that should be there that I can see on OLED, they're there here. I have not found anything that looks like it's being crushed out or clipped out, and on the QN90A I can't really say the same thing. Now that doesn't mean to say that it looks better than the QN90A, not at all. It just depends scene by scene as to which one someone may prefer, and if someone would rather have more detail at the expense of less brightness, and slightly grayer blacks when the zones have to be on, and I do mean slightly. Here you can see if you have the local dimming off or low, then you're looking at gray. But when you put it to medium or high, it actually does have pretty darn good black levels, while keeping very good detail. And then the same thing with the high end. If you turn all the stuff up and you have it as bright as it can go, it holds on to that detail, and that's, I think, this TV's ace that I have not seen on the QN90A, for example, or the X90J. They both made sacrifices to try and get deeper blacks or brighter highlights. I think this TV is trying to strike the balance between good enough blacks, good enough brightness, and holding on to detail. So that may be of interest to some people, and certainly in certain scenes it can make a pretty good difference. So just something to keep in mind, that this TV is probably going to get trash reviews on paper, and a lot of people may know that when something isn't good on paper and gets trash reviews, then people are going to run with that and just assume that the whole TV's trash, and it's really not. This TV on paper may not measure the brightest or have the best blacks, but it is doing something different, and that will probably appeal to some people. The main concern at this point that I have is this TV should be the gamer's choice that does not want OLED, and LG needs to spread some of that love over to this that they have given the OLEDs. They need to give it Dolby Vision 120, they need to fix the HGIG, and very slightly this TV does seem to have more input lag. I don't have a way of measuring it. However, if I run my receiver to both TVs at the same time, I can see that it takes longer for a scene to switch on this versus the G1. And then when I'm just playing, like playing Destiny, I can pull the trigger, let go, and then see it fire. Not like that slowly, but I'm saying there is a slight difference in the input lag that I can feel versus the G1. I'm trying to cram as much as I can into this video because this is going to be the main video for this TV before I can work on the review. Hopefully have that done by the weekend, but I know a lot of people are really looking forward to information on this, so I'm trying to give as much as I can. So just real quick, some more numbers. I counted the local dimming zones by using the Spears and Munzel full array local dimming test pattern, and it's just a little box that goes across the top and then down the side of the screen. And what I did is I counted every time I would see let's say a shift, or it looked like it was lighting up the next zone. It's kind of hard to do when the zones are getting this small, but I'm pretty sure I got it accurate at 38 across the top and 24 going down for a total of 912 zones, which is quite impressive for a 65-inch. Beyond that, I measured a darkest black level of 0.038 when using local dimming, and that was with a brightness of 780. So that puts the local dimming contrast somewhere in the range of 20,000 to 1, whereas native contrast was typical for an IPS, if actually a little bit higher than normal for an IPS at 1,200 to 1. So definitely just use local dimming with this TV. That's just what it comes down to. And I would say toy with medium and high. In some scenes, low can look good and it can get a little bit brighter. But in the limited time that I've had with the TV, I saw more issues with low, looking like it wasn't even doing anything. So I would say medium or high, with high being the most consistent. Even in SDR, which was the opposite for the QN90A, where I would use it at low for SDR on the QN90A, while on this, as I just put local dimming at high and start there, and then mess around however you want from there. So right here you can see that glow when it's on off or low, but you put it on medium or high and it's gone, and it looks really good. There is slightly more blooming on medium than there is on high, which is why I'm using high more. Even still, there is blooming on high, and I would say the blooming is more than I saw on the QN90A, which is pretty much expected. But I would say it was less blooming than what I had seen on the X90J. Which was a V8 panel, so I guess that's pretty good considering this is IPS. I'm going to guess that the blooming overall might be somewhat similar to the X95J, but not having seen that TV, I can't say that for sure. And then based on the on-paper numbers that I got, I would say on paper it's similar to the 950H last year, as far as the black level measurement and brightness measurements. And that was a VA panel and a flagship. This is a IPS flagship from LG, so that's actually pretty decent if you really think about it. Again, the problem right now is the $2,000 price tag for the 65-inch puts it in some really stiff competition. So I think that price needs to come down to at least like $1,500. So here comparing with the 77-inch G1, and the G1 is fully calibrated. And you can just kind of see the overall or average picture level brightness advantage that it has over the G1. And then some of the highlights get a little bit brighter. But the only way to do that was to have HDR tone mapping on and even dynamic contrast on. Otherwise, it wasn't wanting to compete when trying to stay accurate compared to the OLED. And that's really not a fair comparison because I wouldn't expect it to compete in accuracy with an OLED. So I turned HDR tone mapping on the G1 on, and then turned it on the QNED, and then I have the local dimming on high, and right there I turned up the ISO of the camera so you could see the effect of medium and high. And then anyway, so if you're kind of just throw accuracy out the window and you're just going for what most people like to look at anyway, and that's HDR tone mapping turned on and a brighter average picture level, then it's definitely surpassing the G1 in bright scenes, and it's holding up very, very well in dark scenes. The camera is not able to capture the detail in very bright areas of the QNED, so if it looks like it's blowing out, it's not. Keep in mind that I said this TV is very good at holding on to detail. So right there, that yellow was very yellow and very detailed. I just can't, if I were to increase the camera settings to show that, then it would make everything else look dull and dim. Alright, so switching over back to gaming for a minute here. Wanted to check the local dimming and how it was working in gaming, and again, if it's off, it's obviously not great, and if it's on low, it's similar to off, and then when it's on medium or high, it looks good. Here I was checking for ghosting or inverse ghosting, and I didn't really see either. Seems to have pretty good pixel response time. But again, the input lag is just slightly noticeable compared to the G1, and this is at 120 Hertz here. And then the camera, the swirls that you're seeing is from the camera, it's not the TV. However, it does show some color banding in the skies at 4K 120 HDR, just as any TV would. But those swirls is just an effect of the camera, and you don't see it in the camera screen when recording, so I didn't realize it was there until making this video, and that's kind of annoying. But anyway, something else I noticed, the game mode in SDR defaulted contrast to 95, which is too high. Over 80 or over 81 clips colors, so do not put your contrast really over 80. Here I'm just looking at some pictures I took. This is Dolby Vision, The Witcher. You can see the darkness of OLED, but you could also see the detail that the QNED was keeping. This is what happens if you try to make the QNED accurate with HDR tone mapping disabled and everything else, and it just does not get as bright as the OLED. And then if I turn on HDR tone mapping on both of them, they're both going to get brighter, and then the QNED starts to catch up a bit. There is a difference in the white color, but that's because the G1 is calibrated, the QNED is not. But if you're just trying to pay attention to the average picture brightness, they're probably about the same right now. But then once you turn on dynamic contrast enhancer, which is something typically I would always say not to use, that's where some of the brightness comes, at least when it comes to the overall average picture brightness. And so if you really like that bright image, and you have a bright room, or you just like all that punch or whatever, and you don't really care about accuracy, then this TV does hold up pretty well to even OLED. And here, this is again with HDR tone mapping and contrast enhancer turned on, and this is a dark scene, and it is holding up very well. The shadow detail is actually a little better than the G1. The dark areas where it is able to turn off zones are getting dark, and then you have that brightness coming through the windows, and then like this owl, it just looks like it's popping forward a little bit more. So there are times where this QNED can be very impressive, so don't let the IPS scare you. The mini LED really is doing some great things here. So there are some disappointments overall with the TV so far. This is just an initial impression, first look, whatever you want to call it. It's not a review. I will be working on a review. This is just literally a couple of hours with the TV, and my takeaway is if you don't care about accuracy, it's a contender. And if you're not worried about having on paper a super high brightness level, it's a contender. So this has been running, I'm actually kind of surprised I crammed as much as I did, but I did speed up a lot of the footage so that I could. But we're almost at 20 minutes, so I'm going to call it here and start working on a review and looking more into it. And I just realized I left my cup in front of the G1 and you see my straw. Anyway, I hope this helps, and if you liked it, just a reminder, if you press the like button, then more people can find the video, and I will catch you in the next one, and have a good one.